Every corset needs to have boning. If it doesn't have boning, it's really not a corset. And there's so many types of boning to choose from, it's sometimes difficult to know which is the right boning. I typically get asked the question, what is the perfect boning for the corset? And there is no perfect boning. In fact, in my opinion, a corset, the best corsets have a selection of boning in them. So it's important to know the characteristics of the boning available so that you know which boning is going to be the right boning for your project. I'm going to start with spiral boning. Spiral boning is the boning that most people are aware of. It looks like a flattened spring and it's gray. Not sure if you can see the details of that, but it can flex forward and backward and sideways, and that's what makes this boning really special. Most boning can go forwards and backwards, but not sideways, and this can. So it can go into princess seams of a dress or of a jacket to give some support. It can be used in doublets, it can be used in bone bodices, it can be used in modern day dresses just to keep the fabric where it needs to stay and keep it from wrinkling up. This is 1/4 inch spiral bone. It's fairly lightweight. There's also 7/16 inch spiral bone, and it's actually easier to see the details of that boning. Again, forward, backward, and it can go side to side. So it's really quite an amazing boning. It's quite flexible. Being quite flexible means that it's not giving you the same support that a rigid boning would, but it also means that you can dance in this corset. You could put it in a ballet corset or a ballet bodice. You can put it into pretty much anything where there's going to be movement required. If you'll notice the ends of these, they haven't been capped. You can buy them in pre-finished lengths, but if you cut them yourself, you'll have you add the caps. And in another video, I'll be showing you how to secure these tips to the bones. And these are called U-tips, and they come in various sizes. This boning is 6mm, this is 7/16 of an inch, and it also comes in a smaller size, 4mm. And that's more for if you're wanting to put 2 bones or 3 bones or even 4 bones side by side. But again, you get flexibility and support. And these come in pre-tipped, so you can get them in finished lengths every 1/2 inch. So from I think 4 inches right through to 20 inches. You need to buy the tips to go on them if you're going to cut it. So these 2 pieces were cut from long coils. If you're going to cut this, you need a bolt cutter or something with a sharp edge. And when you cut it, you're cutting one side of the wire and then the other side of the wire. Don't try to cut all the way across, just cut one wire and the other wire and the tip will fall off. White bones. White bones are the next most common bone. And they're called white bones because they're white. But they're actually also called spring steel bones because they're made of spring steel. And the important thing about spring steel is the fact that it always wants to spring back into its original shape. So it doesn't bend out of shape easily. And again, like a busk, it should flex, but when I flex it, it should not stay bent. So it flexes, but it doesn't stay bent. And you will see that there are some white bones on the market that when you bend them, when you flex them, they stay bent, and those are not good bones. So this is a pre-finished 6mm bone. This is a pre-finished 8mm bone, and this is a pre-finished 11mm bone. So how do you choose? A lot of that depends on the support that you need and how big the body is. Proportionately, you usually use a wider bone for a larger corset and a narrower bone for a smaller corset, just regarding proportion. But the 6mm bone is actually very thick. It's thicker than the 11mm. So it will give you a lot of support. The 8mm is sort of a mid-range bone. When you're looking at boning and you're trying to decide, I would suggest always having a selection. buy them from a few different companies, label them with where they're from and which bone it is, and keep them in a mug or something, so that you have a project coming up, you can see which bone is the type of bone that you need, and then you can order that quality. These bones also come, as you can see, that's been pre-cut by the meter. So if you're doing a lot of corsets, you might want to buy this on the coil, and you can then use the same kind of tips that you use on the spiral boning. The exact same U-tips can be used to finish this boning as finish the spiral boning. So white bones are known as spring steel bones. They should be springy, flexible, but not bend, and they come in various sizes. And the wider ones are used more for larger corsets, smaller ones for smaller corsets. One thing is, these bones, my 1/4 inch bones, the really strong ones, I always use them in the back of a corset, on either side of the grommets, because it supports the stress on the grommets, and I think that's really important. Spiral bones, if they're used down the back of a corset, your back can get distorted as the corset is worn. This will keep the back of your corset nice and straight, and it adds back support, which is an extra bonus. Now I've shown you these little tips, and they're called U-tips or bone tips. And the big one shows the details the best. The little one is the same. Farthingale sells these in aluminum. And because they're aluminum, it means they're soft. And if they're soft, they're easy to apply. And you can apply them with 2 sets of pliers. There's crimping at the bottom, and that crimping is important, because as you squish the tips to fit the bone, that crimping is already there, and it takes up the extra sort of naturally, and it's not as bulky with it. So you're looking at aluminum bone tips with a little crimping around the bottom, and that will make setting of these bone tips the simplest. So there they are. Most sites don't say that they're aluminum. Go with the website that says these are aluminum bone tips, and I know Farthingale's bone tips are aluminum because we make sure of that. If they're steel, it will be virtually impossible to apply them to a bone. And in a future video, I will be showing you and demonstrating how to apply these bone tips. I'm going to move on to plastic boning now. And we often think that plastic boning is no good for corsets, and that's actually not true. But I will say that the boning you buy in an average fabric store is not a good choice for corsets. The boning that I have here is actually designed for corsets. So it is plastic boning, and maybe we should use the word synthetic boning, and it won't be quite so offensive. Plastic boning, or in this case German plastic boning, synthetic boning, this is so you can sew through it. So we sometimes think, well, if you can sew through it, it can't be strong, but it is incredibly durable. And in fact, when you look at it the first time, you're going to think, I can't sew through that, but give it a try on some scrap. Comes in 5mm, which is used, we sell more of this for the millinery trade than for the corset trade, but we do have people buying it for doll corsets. 7mm, which is provided in some of our corset kits and is used a lot. We sell about 7,000 to 8,000 meters of this a year to corset makers. You can see it's slightly striped. You can cut the ends with scissors. You can round them if you want. So if I had scissors, I could just cut that to a point. I could cut it round. I can use a file to take the corners off. And again, I can sew through it. It is a type of polyester, but you can dye it. So if you were able to dye polyester, you can dye these bones. This is the 11mm, and the stripes are more obvious, and there's 13mm. So you can see there's different widths, and it is remarkably, it is flexible, but it doesn't bend and stay bent. It will come back. As these warm up, they start to take the shape of your body. Some corset makers really like that, some don't. So again, it's a matter of personal choice. And that is German plastic whalebone. There's also simply plastic whalebone. It's white. It can't be sewn through. So it's a synthetic whalebone, and the idea was that it would mimic original whalebone. But the original whalebone is much more like the spiral boning in that it can wiggle in different directions. So this can be cut with scissors. I find using tin snips is better, and it cannot be sewn through, and that's really important to remember. If you try to sew through this, you will break a needle. I sell about 5,000 meters of this a year, so clearly there are people who appreciate working with it. And it comes in a thicker one too, but it's narrower but thicker, and this is not so good for corset boning. We sell this mostly to a company that does really interesting theatrical installations. So it does exist, but it's not a good choice for corset making. You can see it's really, really thick. I'm not sure if you can see that. So it's very difficult to blunt the ends. They tend to stay really sharp. So this is plastic whalebone. The striped is German plastic boning. And the striped you can sew through, the solid you can't. But both of these have been engineered for corsets. So they're both a good choice. And by using these, you don't need to buy any special tools because you can use scissors. So you've probably all heard of Ridgeline. And Ridgeline was a woven plastic boning, and that's what this is. And woven plastic boning tends to fray. So there's all little bits on the ends, and then you get pricklies. I'm not sure if you can see that. See if I can do it with the white one better. So you get all these little prickly ends. They prickle you through the corset. They prickle and poke through the fabric. And this boning bends really easily. It's not a good choice for corsets. It just isn't. So if I can bend it that easily, it's not a choice for corsets. You may want to put this in a boned bodice for a gown that you're wearing over your corset, but I wouldn't use it for a corset. There are little ends now that come and fit over them, so it protects them. The little pricklies won't work through there, and you can sew through this boning and you can sew through the cap. So it's great that way. Really, it's a creative piece. You can use it for a lot of different things, but I would not use woven boning or anything like Ridgeline for a corset. So I'm showing it to you here just because I want you to know not to use it, but that it does exist and it does have its purposes. And that's it for boning. I'm Linda Sparks, and I hope you've learned something from this video today and will consider viewing some of the other videos that we're doing. I'm the owner of Farthingales here in Stratford, Ontario, Canada. We're an online store for corset making supplies, so you can find anything that we've used today on our website, and that's www.farthingalescorsetmakingsupplies.com. You can also find our product at Vogue Fabrics in Evanston, Illinois, and they also have a website, voguefabricsstore.com. So again, I hope you've enjoyed the video, I hope you've learned something, and I hope that you'll check in again. Thanks for watching.